if everybody's ready, we can get started. It's 3 o'clock. And everything. So this is the No Bad Romance panel, and I can safely say that I have not really read romance and didn't like. I don't write them, but I do read them, and there's always something in there to relate to. So romance is a lot more than what it often seems to be on the surface, and that's one of the reasons I'm glad that I'm moderating this panel. It is one of the most widely read and varied genres in fiction. There are so many subgenres of romance that really anyone can find something they like in it. So now is your chance to hear our romance panelists discuss what it's like to write about love. Okay, so I'm just gonna introduce everybody, and then they can kind of tell you a little bit about themselves after I introduce. And this is Christine DiPetrillo. Christine.
I've been writing romance, publishing romance since 2010. I tend to do a series, so I have a contemporary series, a paranormal series, and a science fiction series. And most of my books take place deep in the woods of Vermont.
Okay, that sounds really nice. Now, we also have Laurel Ostagai here, and she also writes romance, but now she can tell you what to read.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Laurel Ostagai. I write new adult romance. They are all based in college in the 1990s, so I'm doing a series of a fictitious campus in upstate New York. And right now I have 3 in the series, and when I'm done I'll have 5. So I'm going to take them all through college to graduation.
Great. And we have Regina Andrews.
Hi everybody, my name is Regina Andrews. I write contemporary, inspirational romance. It's faith-based romance with lots of ups and downs, but always a happy ending. I have series as well as standalone novels as well. I've been doing it since about 2010.
Great. Okay, so all our authors on the panel today are members of ARIA, and they're also all college educated, so this is awesome. They all know what they're talking about. So I'm going to start with really a question that I think gets asked in genres that are considered more weird than romance, and that is why? How and why did you decide to write romance over any other genre? Christy?
Well, during the day I teach 5th grade, so I started writing for that age group. I said, oh, I know middle-aged readers, I'm going to write adventure stories for them. So that's what I started to do, but as I wrote this story about a 12-year-old girl, I became fascinated by her uncle and his relationship with a mermaid. And I took a pause on writing this book with this 12-year-old character who I kind of wasn't feeling anymore. And I took a break and I wrote an adult romance, which won a contest. And then since then, I was like, that's what I need to be writing. So I haven't looked back since.
Great. Okay, so how about Laurel?
Yes, for the first book, I had a story in my head that I just could not get out, and I think any book based in college, there's a romance element to it. So I've always wanted to write a series of college students, and so honestly, I found myself in the genre of romance, and I've loved it ever since. So right now, I can't see myself writing anything else. I just truly love it.
Good. I think we're starting a theme here. Everybody loves it. Regina, what about you?
Absolutely. I love romance as well, and I grew up reading a lot of the classical literature, which I also enjoy, but there was something about the romance that absolutely transported me. And I remember being a voracious reader of Barbara Cartland, who is a very famous romance writer. There was always twists and turns and ups and downs with royalty and paupers and jewels and castles completely escaping, and I thought, oh, this is a wonderful way to de-stress from the day, and also a wonderful way to learn about human nature. So from that point, I thought, oh, romance, contemporary, is the way to go for me.
Great. Okay, so now that we know that you all love writing romance, I'm going to ask you about the other side of things. What's the hardest thing about writing romance for you, Christine?
I think the hardest thing about writing romance, let me just check the age group, okay, is writing the sex scenes when you're not in the mood. Sometimes I have to walk away and de-stress and get whatever happened during the day away from me, and then come back and really get at what my characters are feeling so that I can make those scenes successful.
And what about Laurel? What's the hardest thing for you?
I actually agree with that. I think one of the reasons that I have difficulty writing it sometimes is that I have to take out who I think is going to read the book. So my mother, for example. So there are moments where I have to say, I have to stop thinking that my mom is going to read this. And so I just was having a conversation with someone, and he was asking me the same thing. And I said, absolutely, the best thing you can do is stop thinking who's going to read it and just write it. I think the other thing that's really difficult is emotions. There's so many different kinds of emotions in relationships, but you only know yourself and maybe what's around you, and so you really have to start thinking outside the box of different types of relationships and things that you may not be used to in your life, and putting those elements into a character, so that can also be very difficult.
Okay, then Regina, maybe you have a different perspective on what's difficult.
I do. Being a writer of faith-based books, my books are both mostly sweet, and I can't write scenes like that anyway, so even if I tried, I'd be terrible at that. So that's a problem that I don't have, but I feel for you, because it must be very tough. What I have a problem with, though, quite often, is making sure that a romance is not a predictable and just repeating the same plot over and over again, with having a problem, they meet each other, and then there's a problem, and then they get together, then they split up, and I don't like it predictable. I don't like to read predictable books either. So keeping twists and turns that are fresh in a romance that is basically a predictable formula is quite difficult for me sometimes.
Okay, these are all great answers. So now I know this might get a little personal. So we all get inspired for our writing in different ways, but when it comes to romance that is so emotional and it is so, in a way, you can't really research much for relationships. Your research is really your experience. So what is something that inspired a character or something in one of your books that, maybe, where do you get the inspiration from and not make it too much like your own life?
I think for me, in particular, I'll use the book I have on display here, More Than Pancakes. Again, there's personal connections that you can capitalize upon. My husband and I own some property in Vermont, and maple syrup company tapped the trees. So we were up there one winter, it was frigid out, and there were a group of men heading out to maintain the trees, and I just thought it was just really sexy to watch these men planning to spend an entire day out in the frigid snow. And they've got their tools, and literally they were going to be out there all day. And I'm of course inside toasty with my hot cocoa, watching them trek out in the woods, and I'm thinking, there's a character right there. And that happens to me often. I think to be a good writer of any genre, you have to be a people watcher, because there's inspiration everywhere.
All right, and Laurel, how about you?
I think also not being afraid to experience things, I think, is really important as a romance writer. For me personally, I lost my father when I was young, and so in the first book they always say write what you know, and so I think it was really important that in talking about death, it was something that I was very familiar with. I felt the emotions were really raw, and it was very easy for me to write about it, so that's really what inspired me in the first book. And I take notes on people and people watching true love, situations that don't go as well. I think all those things you sort of just put in your back pocket, and it can make for some great reading. So,
Thank you. And Regina, how about you?
Yes, it's so interesting, isn't it? I grew up in Barrington, which isn't very far from here. It's a very pretty, idyllic town, and in spite of that, there were families who had problems. There were people who had needs. There were things that were not always perfect and not as pretty as the picture that the town portrayed. And thinking of that, the series book, Sterling Lake series, came to mind, which was a setting that was very beautiful, but it was more of a reflection of the spiritual state of the town, which is up and down, and which is real life. So just being a people watcher, just like my other colleagues just said, is really very important, I find, in thinking about how you're going to relate to people when you write and how your stories are going to resonate with them, because everything isn't perfect and peachy. There are ups and downs, and those are the conflicts that really make, I think, a book interesting as well.
So it can be a little easy sometimes to talk about being inspired, and that is the best part of the process. When everything's flowing, and you just sit down and it's the words are coming out. But what do you do when you're stuck on a scene? I mean, I know what I do, and I don't really think blasting German techno is going to help you guys write romance. So I wonder what do romance writers do when they get stuck on the scene? Christy?
Actually, you bring up music, and that's something that does work for me. When I'm writing, I do listen to music. Mostly I listen to instrumental, but it's a wide range. I listen to all kind of music except country. That's the only one I can't get into. But I always listen. Also, having those earbuds in when the family's around lets them know that this is writing time, don't bug me. So the music serves a lot of purposes. But when I'm stuck on a scene, which happens, multiple times every book, I find that if I change the music to something different, I can pick up and continue. I don't know why it works, but it does. Also, taking a break and going for a long walk. I often take walks with my characters, so you'll see me in my neighborhood, and I'm Italian, so my arms are going, and I'm having full conversations, so I'm sure the neighbors are like, oh, there's that girl. But it works, and it gets me over that hump, and I can continue to generate pages and tell the story.
Wow. Maybe you ought to drop some of your books in their mailboxes so that they know what you're actually doing.
True, yeah.
But that's really interesting about music and how just changing the song. Wow. I would never have thought. Maybe I'll have to branch out from German techno. And what about Laurel? What do you do when you're stuck?
I feel like we're on the same page here, yes, because
we all are.
Again, my books are based in the 1990s, so in college. So I go back and I listen to a lot of the music that I listened to in college, and it really inspires me to think of moments in time, try to remember all of my days in college, and often I'll reach out to my former roommates and I'll say, do you remember when? And we'll talk about things, or I'll ask them to email me memories or things, and that can kind of jog me to sort of keep going. The other thing I do is I try not to worry about it too much. If I'm getting stuck in a scene or a moment, I'll just stop and sort of let it go and not try and worry about it. And know that the creative process is meant to go back and forth many, many times. And so if I don't get it right the first time, maybe by the fifth time, it'll be there. So I really try not to overanalyze it or worry about it.
Good. I think the Queen Elsa needs to listen to that. Anyway, what about Regina? What do you do when you're stuck?
Well, I think it's 100% for music, because I do it as well. I always listen to music when I'm writing, and the type of music that I'm listening to really helps my imagination get sparked, because I try to imagine the time period when it was written and what it was like when the composer was writing it and everything. So it projects me into another sphere, into another time, into another place. So I really like that. When I'm stuck on a scene, one little trick I have is I usually try to change the point of view that I'm using in writing the scene that I'm stuck on. And 9 times out of 10, the result from changing the point of view is so bad that when I go back and go back to the original scene that didn't really work that well, it's not quite as bad as I thought it was, and I'm able to revise it and then move forward with a little bit more confidence and a little bit more understanding about what needs to be done for that scene to get it done.
So this sort of like saying what you did when you got stuck sort of leads a little bit into this question, and that is when you have a typical day of writing. Like I know most people are writing and doing something else too, some of their job. But if you had an entire day where you could just sit your butt down in that chair and just write, what would that day look like for you, Christine?
Oh, that would be a day with yoga pants and a messy bun and those sorts of things. I don't know that I could sit down and just write for a whole day, because that's not really my format, because I do have a day job. So my sweet spot for writing is 7 p.m. to about 11 p.m. And I give myself a daily goal. I must write 4 pages every day. So if I write more than that, I'm high-fiving myself, and I don't allow myself to write less than that, so it kind of keeps the flow going. I think if I had a whole day, though, I would probably have to break it up midway and go for one of those walks with my characters.
And what about you, Laurel?
I think a whole day of writing sounds like heaven to me, so I would absolutely love it. Which I've never had that opportunity, so working full time, you kind of sneak it in when you can. But for me, I probably could write a whole day, but I think I would just be in a really comfortable place by myself, just really loving every minute of it and taking that opportunity and just going as far as I can. You definitely need breaks. There's nothing wrong with that. I think maybe changing up the scenery where you're sitting, maybe going to a coffee shop and sitting there instead. But just the thought of that is so wonderful that I hope we all get that someday. So.
No, I agree. I agree completely. Yes. Being able to write for an entire day would be just heavenly, and if my brain would be able to keep up with that aspiration, I would be really happy. Sometimes my brain would just run out of gas if I had that opportunity. When I find myself not being as productive or as creative in terms of producing at a certain point, I would turn to looking at other aspects of the work in progress, such as the plot or characterization, or even reviewing my settings or something else. So it would be still relative to what I was writing, but it might not be producing brand new copy at that point. It still would be productive, and hopefully when we go back to it the next day, it's not a splash.
Well, I don't know about you, but I find that I write more if I have less time.
Yes.
Because I take that time more seriously. It's sacred now.
That's right.
When I do have a whole day, which is rare, I think I have a whole day, and I don't buckle down like I do when I only have an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I also, as you might guess, don't get really full day to write. So, but yeah, it does seem like, what do you do with it? I always wonder what people would do with a whole day. All right, is there like a common theme or element in your work? What's like the thing that kind of binds it all together?
My tagline is "Love grows in the woods." So all of my books, whether it's the contemporary, the paranormal, or the science fiction, they all take place in the woods. And I'm very into nature, so all of my books, the setting is as much a character as the actual people are. So.
How about you, Laurel?
Yeah, so mine are all based in college, like I mentioned before, so the theme is really new adult, that coming of age, but enough that they're adult enough that they can have adult situations. But yeah, it's just a campus in upstate New York where they're all trying to figure things out, they're meeting new people. Anyone that went to college, I remember that freshman year feeling. It was like the greatest feeling in the world. It's very exciting, it's very fresh. You're away from your parents for the first time in most cases, so that's sort of how I'm building these characters in this environment, that they're learning a lot in a very short period of time and expecting a lot from themselves and developing in the same process. So.
And Regina?
Yeah. very intense. That's really interesting. For me, the characterization it's well, the hero and the heroine, of course, it's a love story, but they are finding their destiny and they're finding their way in life through faith, whether or not they have faith or whether or not they have a very strong faith or they're just discovering faith or they've lost faith or there's some other motivating factor in their psyche that is driving them to follow a path that they are following in the book. So their relationship, which they probably don't start out being so great together, they may discover new things about each other and eventually have to take a leap of faith throughout the book to progress into the people and the individuals that they need to be in the course of all the conflicts and ups and downs that they experience. And the resolution, of course, is that they understand that they are living a life together because of God's love. And it's not heavy-handed or religious. It's more about just destiny and where we all belong in life and how we find our way.
Is there a genre, or a subgenre really, of romance that you just don't like?
No.
I agree with you. How about you?
I'm going to say no too.
Well, I'm not that into erotica, that's all I would say, but I do like all different kinds.
Okay, great. It's a likable genre, and this kind of goes along with this. There are a lot of folks out there who have big misconceptions about the romance genre. Often I hear people kind of poo-pooing it, and I feel like as though they think there's really not much to it. But the romances I've read they're complex, they're touching, they're human, and there's a lot of vibrancy in these stories. So, what's the most common misconception about romance that you've heard as a romance author? Because I know that if you say, "Oh, I write romance," I'm sure you get a lot of responses.
Yeah.
I think some people don't realize the range that romance encompasses. Either people think that it's just fluff, and that nothing serious goes on, that it's just, silly flirting kinds of things, and that there's no depth to them. Or people go on the other end and they think that it's just sex and that's all it is on every page. So I think, if I could tell people one thing about romance, it would be that, there's really, it's like a buffet. There's something for everyone in terms of what you might like, and just knowing that it's going to end with a happily ever after. But the way that an author gets there could be any path. There's so many choices. And Laurel?
I agree. I mean, I think there's always a misperception that it's a very easy thing to write. That, like you said, it's a lot of fluff. There's no substance really behind it, and I actually find it the exact opposite. I think writing people's emotions is very difficult, and again, it's such a large buffet that it is hard to imagine who you're going to be writing this for. And I learned through another interview that it's 74% of sales on Amazon are actually romance. So for someone like myself who writes it, that means it's a very small percent that I'm actually going to be able to grab their attention. So I look at it as with the opposite, that there's so many romance writers out there, and that when you put yourself in this romance category, it sort of throws everything else off, and you can't really say, but I'm this. And so pitching a book, I think, is difficult. I can say mine are based in college, and that'll change someone's mind as to whether or not they want to read it. But yeah, it's very hard to pitch romance too. And I think when you work full time and you say to your colleagues, "I write romance," they kind of go, oh, and their mind either goes one or two ways, like, "Oh, what kind of romance?" Or you get the, "Oh, okay," there's nothing to that. So I think it depends on who you're talking to. But yeah, I've seen different reactions, and it's always interesting when you tell people what you do. So.
And Regina?
Yes, absolutely. I agree too. I think it's so interesting that people are so quick to dismiss romance as just fluff or having no value, when in reality, to write a core love story where the two main characters really have a connection throughout the entire book. The connection changes, it morphs into something else, and it is reborn at the end into something new. Is just an incredibly difficult technical achievement. And on top of that, we have different settings, we have different, incredible amount of different settings and events that occur. So I also get a lot of, or I don't get it anymore as much, but in the beginning it was like, oh, romance, oh my god, you know, and they very quick to assume that it's just sludgy, but it's not at all. So I really hope we can change that.
I feel like sometimes just being an author who is a woman, you know, I've also been, I'm an author. Oh, you write romance. I write weird stuff about single moms getting stuck in video games and vampires. And then they're like, oh, so it's like Twilight. Wow. Okay, stop. But I don't, yeah, I mean, and I really do, I really do, if I tell someone I'm reading a book and they ask me what, and I say the name of it, I don't know that, what is that? And I say it's romance of any type, even if it's, you know, military science fiction romance. You know, they're like, oh, it's romance. You know, and it just, I don't know, it irks me. It's this entire genre that's just huge and has so much to it that I don't, I really wish more people would sort of just look past that. But anyway, everybody here is at the Expo at tables with their wonderful books that have all this depth and humanity and what great themes and human emotion in them. So where are you guys? Where do we find you?
I'm, where am I? Table 417, which is on the opposite end of the screen.
So it's like a hike through the woods to get to
It is, yes. Yes, swing through all the other authors and then come to the woods on the other end. That's where I'm at.
And how about Laurel? Where are you?
So I think in the book it says I'm in row 3, but I was moved to row 2, so I think I'm 212. Yeah, right in the second row here.
Okay.
Yep.
Where's Regina? Where are you?
She's at table 405.
Great.
Yes, which is right there.
So you guys can just, you can go to Regina, and then you can go to Laurel, and then you can go to Christine, and you can just pick up amazing books. And also, I wanted to know if anybody has any questions for these wonderful authors here today. Yeah.
So you're married.
I am.
That so your husband is probably married.
Yes.
Married.
Yes.
So I've always wanted to know. You guys are obviously successful with writing. You have a passion. You have love and it's romance. I know you in your comment about you mentioned having these men in your yard in Vermont, and you're like, ooh, that's a character. How do your husbands, do they read your books? What do they think? And do you ever get that question? Where did you get the inspiration for that? And am I, just for curiosity, do you feel? How do you handle that as a female, as a writer, and as a romance? It's most guys are like, well, that's based on me, right? Yeah, honey, sure.
My husband has not read any of my books. My husband is strictly a nonfiction guy. He would rather pick up, a lawnmower manual and learn how to take it apart and put it back together. But yeah, I pretty much free reign. He'll never know. But there is a little bit of him in every one of my books. He does a lot of construction work and he builds furniture and all sorts of things. So most of my men are handy like that, and he's bearded. Most of my men are bearded. So there's flavor of him, but again, he'll never know.
How about you, Laurel?
I'm actually on the opposite side. So my husband has read both my books. He hasn't read the third one yet. It hasn't come out yet. But I wanted to be really respectful of any sort of privacy. So I was really careful about, especially that they're in college, and a lot of my college friends have read them. So I was very careful about not putting anyone's specific instances that I knew about in them. So I think I just have a really good imagination. And so I think that's been very helpful for me, and it's almost easy to write about. I mean, this is like flowing out of me. So I'm about 100 and something pages into the fourth book already. So I just feel like it comes out of me so fast that I try not to think too much about it. But he's actually never asked me if it's about him. So yeah, so maybe he just is flattered and thinks it is. So I hope he never sees this.
But it's supportive, so that's
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
That's and Regina. Yes, actually, my husband is my alpha reader. He just reads everything, and I started out doing that because I thought it would be really cool to have his point of view, and he's able to disassociate himself from it, at least when we're talking. How he feels privately, I'm pretty sure he's cool with it too. But he, although he works in engineering, and well, of course, one of my heroes is sort of in that area. There are little things here and there that have been inspired by being associated with him. But on the whole, I don't really do that too much. But I do appreciate his point of view. And there have been things that I've done wrong. I had a baseball star as a hero in one of my books. I was off, and when hearing that, he set me straight. I was very grateful.
And does anybody else have more questions at all, or? Okay. Well, actually, I do have. I have. Romances do happen in my books, although they are not romance. And I usually put people together. My heroine isn't me. Usually, when I have a main female character or a major female character who ends up in a romance, they're not me. I put them with people I think they're going to be compatible with. And it's interesting to sometimes they surprise you who you think that you're going to put them with. It doesn't end up who they're with. So I had, I had one character in a book, and I said, okay, she's going to end up with this guy. No, she did not end up with that guy. She ended up with another guy. And then there was the one who ended up with the last person. She actually said, "You are the last man I'd ever be with," and she ended up with him. So I try to kind of let the characters speak to me a little bit, and I don't. When I do have characters end up in a relationship, they don't always get a happy ending. I killed my person's romantic partner. I feel bad, but when you write urban fantasy, it's not going to be happy every time. So, anybody else question? All right, and does anybody have anything else they want to say? Maybe one of the panelists wants to ask another question, or you had a question of mine that I didn't ask, or something.
You covered quite a span of topics.
Okay. So I think if you don't already read romance, hopefully you've got a new perspective on it. And if you do read romance, you know where to go and find some here at the Expo.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.